Now I'm going to share my screen for those people who are watching. Bear with me, we're back. You can see my face, unfortunately. It's COMP305. It's week 1, lesson 1, and we're part 3. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to pull up the Unity interface. So here's my Unity interface. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to screen share my Unity interface, just like we normally would do with Hangouts here. And you should be able to see my Unity interface now. There's a bit of a delay, but if you go to my YouTube video, my YouTube site, YouTube/Sinopoulos, you'll hear me. I'm just a little bit behind, and I'm pretty dark, which is kind of weird, right? There we go. All right, so when we log into Unity, you have to have a Unity account, all right? If you've got a personal account. If you've got the one in front of you, if you haven't created a personal account, if you notice it says create one, so I would ask you to do that now, create your Unity account. If you don't have Unity 5 and you have Unity 4, it's kind of the same thing. You still need to create an account, so please go ahead and do that now as we speak. I'm going to see if I can remember my login. How about that? On the machine in front of you, it's technically illegal to do so because we are not using, it would be arresting me, right? So please don't do that. So if you notice, I've just logged in to Unity, and I've got a couple of projects here that I'm doing here. I'm going to just minimize this stuff for you guys to see, and you guys should be able to see my screen now. If you guys should go up on YouTube, I'm recording my screen, so you can see this. If you notice, I've got a couple things that are going on here. I've got projects and getting started. Getting started is kind of like an opening tutorial session you can go through with Unity. I'm going to go into projects, and I'm going to create a new project, right? Now, my view might look different than your view. And if you're using Unity 4, you'll see a different view than me, right? Unity 5, though, and I'm using 5.12. There might be another version yet. But I'm going to click New Project. And if you notice, in Unity 5, we have a couple of options. There's 3D or 2D mode you can go into, right? I'm going to go, and don't worry if you can't follow along. Remember, I'm recording it, right? So worst case scenario, you can see it later, right? All right, so here's my new Unity project. Let's just call this the project of the day. So we're going to say COMP305 lesson 1, right? Lesson 01. And it's going to go where? Our location is really important. You should really tell it where to go. I don't think I want to put it on my desktop. I should probably create some place to put it. For now, though, in this view, because we're in Windows 10, and whatever, I've got some limitations here. I'm going to just leave it on my desktop and click Create Project. You notice there's also asset packages that I can use. For now, I'm not going to use them. I'm just going to go Create Project, like a new blank project. Now, what Unity is doing is it's going through and setting up a bunch of stuff that you're looking at going, what the hell, right? What is all this stuff? And by the way, I'm in really maximized form because my windows are really small. And this is good because you're gonna see this thing massively big like this, right? On my screen. Your screen will look totally different. If you're using Unity 5, you'll have a much bigger screen over here than what mine looks like. But this is good because I want you to see a couple things. In Unity 5, there is something called a Skybox. That's a default that's there, right, in Unity, right? You still have your manipulator arm. So look at this manipulator arm that's right from Blender. But remember what we said with Blender. In Blender, right, we had the X and Y axis flat and the Z axis up. Not so in Unity, not so in Maya, not so in 3D Studio Max. It's Z up for Blender and Y up for Unity. Please be aware of this. When you export stuff from Blender to Unity or from any other program to Unity, it's Y up access. Okay, that's the first thing to know. Second thing is there's two modes. There's scene, there's the scene view, and here we have the game view. This is my game view. You notice there's nothing going on. I also have a console where I get some feedback, right? And I have a hierarchy, which is like the outliner in Blender. Now, how did I get this view? If you want to get the same kind of view like me, obviously not so big. This is just huge, and my resolution is really low, right? You can go to Layout. If you go click Layout, if you notice, there's 2x3, right? There's 4 split. There's the default view, and there's tall and wide. It's different options. Let's try 2x3. Well, this is what 2x3 is. I'm in 2x3 mode right now. The only difference is that My game is down here. My scene is up here, right? And what I want to do is probably put this, you can move it around so that your game sits next to your scene. If you want it to kind of move from from your scene to your game, right? If you notice in 2x3 mode, I have my hierarchy view here. And if you notice in my hierarchy view, it mentions all the objects that I have in three-dimensional space, my main camera being one of them. Here's my main camera. And if you notice, I get a quick preview of my main camera down here. And my directional light, this is here, which is showing me the direction of my light source right now. Okay? Very similar to what we've already talked to, right? I also have a couple things. This is really important to note. We have to keep super laser focused on our assets. When we do stuff in Unity, Unity has a scene architecture or structure, right? So everything is contained in its own scene in Unity, just like it is in Blender. But we have to be super focused when we create stuff in Unity, right? So every asset gets broken down into different folders. So it's really important we do that. Let's change our layout to something else. Let's go from 2x3 to a 4 split. This looks a little different. You know, obviously it's not going to look just like this, but a couple things to note is this. We have the top view in perspective mode. If I want to go into orthographic mode, and again, I talked about orthographic mode being almost like a flat mode. I'm just going to do here top ortho, front ortho, right ortho, and then perspective mode. It's good to kind of have these perspective modes. I can do my modeling here, right? Oh, wow, I'm really slowing down. And I can do my, depending on where I'm pointing, right? I can look at different views, the top view, the front view, and the right view, and so on, and my perspective view that I've got going on right here all at the same time. Again, another favored view. That's why it's kind of a standard split or layout view. Let's go to default. This is what you would normally get when you load your screen, right? Default view. I typically don't program in this view, right? Not because I don't like it, but because there's a couple things. I've got a really huge asset view down here, right? I've got my console hidden behind here. I've got kind of my favorites and my assets hidden over here. I've got my hierarchy over here, and then I got to switch between my game scene and my scene over here. And my inspector, of course, which is context sensitive, is over on the right-hand side. All right, so typically I don't use this. For today, I'm going to stay with this one because it suits my screen, right? So let's leave it at default mode. You can create your own, by the way. Anything that you feel comfortable with. Okay, cool. So let's talk about Unity. So we've got the inspector. Right now, there's nothing to inspect. Yeah? Well, there kind of is. If I look at my camera, now in Unity, we left-click. So here's my left-click. When I left-click my camera, and I can do it two ways. I can do it in the scene. So here's my viewport. I'm doing it in the scene. I can also do it here in the hierarchy, right? I get this context-sensitive menu or selection that comes up on the right-hand side. If you notice, it says I've got a skybox, right? If I want to clear the skybox, I could, get rid of it if I want to. Like, for example, solid color, right? And then I can change my skybox to solid color if I want to, if that's what I really want to do, right? Let's go back to skybox. So I like my skybox. My preview from my camera, if you notice here, is a skybox, right? Okay, cool. I've got some other stuff here. I've got a component that's in every object has this component. It's called the transform component. It has your position in three-dimensional space, your X through Y and your Z. And if you notice that right now, my camera has a -10 from a Z position perspective. Remember what I said? You've got Y up. So if I was going to draw, and I hate to say this again, put your fingers like this. Put your fingers like this, like almost like you're pointing up. Yeah. Okay. Now take this one and go do one of these. By the way, you can also do one of these too, but we don't want that, right? So let's do just one of these like this. So where this middle finger is pointing right at you, right? I know I made you guys do that last time, except I did it the other way, just to make Vanessa crazy, right? All right. So if you notice here, this thumb is my Y up, right? And here is probably the X-axis, and here is the Y-axis as I'm going in and out, right? So when I pan in and out, this is my Y-axis. This is my X-axis, right? This is my Y-axis, this is my Z-axis, my X-axis is my Z-axis, in and out. Sorry, I'll be all right, right? And the reason for us doing that is with the fingers is this is the manipulator arm that we're talking about here, right? My fingers are parts of the manipulator arm that I want you to look at, right? So when you see this thing, it's the same thing. I have my transform. Right now, my Z on the X, I'm at the origin, right? My Y is 1 unit higher than the origin. Now, in Blender, we have something called blender units. In Unity, we don't have blender units, we have meters. Unity is all measured with meters. Maya is measured in centimeters, right? You gotta be very careful. So if I'm going from blender units to meters, I gotta make sure that my meters are already set up, or my units are already set properly in Blender before I export from Blender in this pipeline to dump into Unity. Otherwise, it's gonna do translation. It's gonna make it really, it's gonna increase the size of my option, my part too big or too small. It's not gonna be size proper. Same thing with 3D Studio Max. We have to match the units. And if Unity demands meters, we have to make it meters, okay? Just to note. So if I can do two things. I can move this thing around by hand, or I can physically transform the object by typing in a number like this. So now I've moved my camera to the 0 point from a Y perspective. I move it down so it sits at the 0 point. It's also -10 from a Z perspective, which means it's into the it's away from me by 10. If I press 0, it's gonna move it closer to me. Okay? So that's my camera. Yes. That sucks. I'm missing 1.5 foot of the screen, really? Oh, so you actually don't see my screen, you see me. That sucks. I'm gonna have to re-record this thing in other words. Okay, let's go back. Hold on. See if I can. I know it's madness, eh? It's madness, I tell you, right? I don't like it. I don't like it. Let's go back to so it doesn't give me the option of sharing my Unity. Well, there's a problem with that. There's a problem, right? Let's go to this and click share, and I think I need to click share with everyone. Let me see if that's the issue, because present to everyone. Let's try that. Tell me what you see now. In a second, you might see a change. Huh? 10 seconds, really? So I'm gonna have to re-record this, guys. So bear with me. So when you see this on YouTube, I'll re-record this thing. Thank you for letting me know. This is the thing we have to do. I have to make sure that everything's recorded. Now we're good. Yard, right? That's all I can say. Yard technology, right? Except you're only seeing a portion of my screen. It's like a little piece of my screen, which is messed. It should be big, right? Which is bizarre. Right? It's the bizarro world, right? It's not the regular world. How about this? You still see the same thing? Still small? Yeah, we'll fix it. We'll fix it. I said, right? It's a work in progress, but I'm trying to do it so that you guys can hear what I'm saying and all that kind of stuff, which sucks. Let me just try one more thing. Try to get rid of the delay. How about if I just screen share the whole thing without it causing me to go crazy? Woo! Okay. How about that? Let's see if that changes anything, if that makes the screen bigger. I'm trying to look at the screen, and hopefully you guys can see anything. We're going to stop recording in a second anyway. I just wanted to give you guys an intro on Unity today. And is that better? Does that make it big? All right. Let's see. There's a bit of a delay. I can see myself there. Wait. Yeah, that's how I have to do it, eh? That sucks. That's terrible. All this time I thought you guys were seeing what I'm seeing, and then next time one of you guys do one of those. Like, it's almost like my monitor, right? So I can see like what's going on, because I can't see, right? Okay, so going back, which is really, really important. Again, each of my screens, if you will, and this is why I'm a little faster now too, because I was trying to record myself, which is bad. If you notice, here's my directional light. It also has transform properties. It also has position, X, Y, and Z, and it also has rotation properties, how it's rotated. Right now it's rotated at 50 degrees, 50-degree angle, and a -30 when it comes to the Y position. If I go to rotate this at 0, let me show you what it does. It kind of changes the rotation of my three-dimensional light here, my light source, right? Okay, so Unity has the ability for me to add components as I like, right? And if I want to add an object in Unity, there's a couple ways to do it really quickly, and we'll stop. I want to add a primitive to my scene, right? I'm going to click this where it says Create, left click, I'm going to pull down 3D Object, I'm going to pull down a cube, right? It creates a cube that sits inside of my camera for a second, right? Because my camera is positioned. I click on my main camera is at the origin. If I want to move my main camera around, remember, it's going to see, here's my preview of what I'm looking at right now. Okay, if I want to see what I'm looking at, look at my camera. My camera's actually looking at my cube. That's why it's important for you to understand this stuff, right? There it is, my cube, right? So here's my cube. My cube is not at the origin. My cube is at 0, 0.56, and minus 0.94. Let's make it at the origin by pressing 0. There's one way to do it. 0, 0, that's the origin. If it's not there, let's say I move it somewhere else. So let's move it way over here, and I want it to be at the origin. I can always select the gear, right? And I go reset position, which takes it back to the origin. This is really important because when we move our stuff around the screen, what we really want to do is set everything to the origin for us to move things around. Here's something else that we want to look at. Our cube, as a default, has a couple things. One, it has a box collider by default, right? That's one thing it has. It also has something called a mesh renderer, which casts shadows, which is on right now, okay? Let's add another thing. We talked about all these things already. This is the terminology day today. All right, let's add one more object. Let's go create, all right, 3D object, and we'll create a plane, right? Here's our plane. And this time we'll pull the plane down so it's below our cube. Now this is just kind of like what we did in Blender, right? So here's our cube, and I want to rename this thing, right? I'm going to kind of, if I just click twice slowly, click, click, I can change the cube to player, right? Let's do the same thing. Click, click, I can choose the plane, the ground, right? And we can add our sphere later on. We don't have time for that right now because we're running out of time. But the one thing is, I'm just going to zoom back out again here so you guys can see. Take a look at what I got over here. This is our shader, right? And if you notice right now, my shading mode right now is shaded. I can also look at wireframe, very similar to what we did in Blender. Here's shaded wireframe, right? It kind of gives you wireframe and some shading, right? I can also do other things here, like maps, render paths, shadow cascades, and so on. But typically we work within shaded wireframe or shaded wireframe when it comes to rendering, right? So we can work with our objects, right? Let's go back to shaded. Okay. Well, you notice everything's this default material white. How do I change the material? Well, right now, look at it. It even says for my player, default material, right? Well, in my assets, I want to create a new folder. So I'm going to go in so here's my assets down here. I'm going to go create folder. And inside there, I'm going to make it the material folder. Or materials. Let's make it materials. Click, click. Not double click. Just sometimes click, click's enough. Okay. Here's my materials folder. I'm going to double click now, and it's going to open up my materials folder. Here's my breadcrumbs, assets, materials, right? So this is where I'm in right now. I want to create a new material. So I'm going to right click. I want to create. I'm going to go down where it says material. I missed it. And if you notice my material, I want it to be green, so I'm going to call it green. Right? Now, here's how it's similar to Blender. Instead of diffuse, we have albedo. That's what the diffuse property is called. We're going to click on this and change our color wheel or color palette to green. Right, here's our green. If you notice, we have this diffuse material. And on the right side, if I click away, on the bottom right, we have a preview of what it would look like for our object when we apply the material. Right now, the material is sitting on its own. We haven't applied it to anything, right? All we have is the material just sitting there. Now, albedo is our color. Metallic is our reflectivity, right? This is the same kind of idea, just different names for the same thing. Now, we also have a normal map, a height map, all kinds of other stuff you guys don't know about. Yeah, maybe you haven't heard too much about. But I want to apply my material to my object. Now, there's a couple ways to do this, right? One is I can click on my player object, and I can drag and drop like this, right? And if you notice, once I do that, I should be able to do my material. I should be able to drag it, if I click properly onto it, onto the object, right? Or, now if that doesn't work, you can also do this, drag it right onto the material object in the viewport. Let me undo that change, right? So I'm going to undo that change again. There we go. I can also add components, right? And I can go, if you notice, there's different object components that I can add in. If I go mesh, I can add a mesh filter, a mesh renderer. I can add different effects. I can go to physics, right? So I can add in a rigid body and so on. This is the way we add components or properties to each of our objects, right? As an example. For now, though, the easiest way to add a material is to drag and drop it right onto the object that we're looking at. So we drag and drop it right here. So now our material, right, is on the object. And if I click on it, if you notice, I've got a green with a standard shader. I can also choose different kinds of shaders, right? Right now, only a standard shader is the one that I'm using, right? And I'm going to talk about different kinds of shaders later on. Right now, it's just a standard shader. If I choose standard with specular, that's the specular map we talked about before, the reflectivity that we can give it as well. All right. So again, if you notice, all the same piece parts we talked about in Blender are all transferable pretty much in a nutshell over to Unity. All right. We're going to talk more Unity next week, right? But what I'd ask you to do before I go, and before you guys go, let's see if I can do this before you know, my computer cakes on me because I'm recording everything, right? Go to Unity 3D/learn, right? And I would highly recommend, if not request, that you do some tutorials here. And one of the ones I want you to do first, the first one that I'd like you to try and do, is this rollerball tutorial. All right, it'll be a really quick and dirty tutorial on how to use Unity. The other one I'd like you to try and do after this one, which is, I would say, a lot more difficult, is the space shooter tutorial. If you can take care of those two things over the weekend, I'll be super happy, right? Why? It's going to push us to do more stuff together, right? If everyone's on the same page and you do these things, it'll be great. Do I have to make it an assignment? I'll do it. Whatever is going to motivate you guys. I don't care, right? But we need to get it so that you guys do this thing, so that way we get on the same page, because it gives you kind of a really cool, you know, overview of how Unity works. So again, I'd like you to do both these two things, rollerball and the space shooter tutorial, by next week when we get together. Consider this part of your reading or pre-reading before we get together, okay? Questions before we depart for the day? You don't need to know Blender. I use Blender to introduce 3D stuff. We're going to use Maya and 3D Studio Max. Those are the things I want you to learn in this class, because we've already done Blender in the other classes, right? So we don't want you to do that too much. Right? You can always certainly pick that up as your own tutorial. We're going to be talking about Maya and 3D Studio Max as a part of the pipeline. Any other questions before we depart? All right, let's see if we can stop doing this now. Stop sharing. I feel like it's crazy. And I'm going to stop broadcasting. So see you next week.